Gee, she must be about 150 by now. This is the No Fear podcast. We know what scares you. I'm Matt.
And I'm Mel. And this is the No Fear Cast, the podcast where we dissect horror and all the things that scare us. Join us as we enter into our new series where we get up close and personal with the psycho Biddy herself. We're talking Hagsploitation films.
All right. Well, welcome to our second episode in our series on Hagsploitation. First of all, my apologies for not being able to make last recording for the last episode. I do wish that I'd been able to. It was a great discussion, and I wish I could have contributed. But alas, it is what it is. And as you may have noticed, Lisa is not able to join us for this recording. She will be back next time. So, she's not gone for good, just for this episode. And we will miss her insightful input and hope that we can do justice to this topic and this film. So, as Mel said in the intro, we are continuing Hagsploitation, if you will, or psycho biddies, by really starting with the film that sort of kicked off the subgenre, as it were. It's the 1962 film Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. It was directed by Robert Aldrich, who also did the movie Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte, which was also done with the same screenplay writer, Lucas Heller. Heller wrote both the screenplay for Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. The movie was based on a novel of the same name by Henry Farrell, and it was an award-winning film. Bette Davis and Joan Crawford are the two primary stars, and Davis was nominated for an Oscar for her performance. And it did end up winning for Best Costume Design. It's also nominated for the Cannes Palme d'Or and Golden Globes, among others. And as far as its legacy, if you will, it was remade as a TV movie with Vanessa and Lynn Redgrave, so actual sisters playing the sisters. And the feud between Bette Davis and Joan Crawford, which was apparently quite legendary, actually spawned the TV series Feud in 2017, a Ryan Murphy miniseries that was inspired by their real life feud, and that a lot of that apparently came to the head during the filming of the film. So, just a brief overview for those of you who aren't familiar with it's again starring Bette Davis and Joan Crawford as sisters in an old Hollywood mansion. Davis plays Baby Jane, a former child star, and Crawford is Blanche, her older sister, who is wheelchair bound for most of the movie, except in the flashbacks at the beginning of the movie, and is one of those kind of always in the shadow of her child star sister until she claims the spotlight as an adult. And I'm sure we can talk a bit more about all of the plot and everything else, but that's just kind of a good overview on the film. And I guess to start off, as we normally do when talking about a specific work, we tend to talk about our impressions and experiences with it. So I may shock you by saying this was my first time viewing this film, was in preparation for this podcast episode. It's a movie that I've heard about a lot throughout my life. It's a title that I've been familiar with for ever, it feels like, but I've never actually sat down and watched it. So I'm fairly fresh off of viewing the film. I did watch it very recently, and it was for the first time. And My first impressions were I liked it a lot. I thought it was a well done movie. I thought the acting was great. I thought Betty Davis absolutely deserved that nomination. Not being familiar with any of the other people who were nominated in the same category that year, I can't say, oh, she deserved to win with certainty, but she did a really, really good performance. And I'm kind of surprised that she didn't win, just based on my viewing. One thing that I will say, and this is probably not something that we need to spend a lot of time talking on, so that's why I'm throwing it out here in kind of my first impressions, is I I don't watch older movies regularly. I have nothing against them. I like them. Every now and then I'll put on I'll look through the Turner Classic Music Movies section of HBO Max and put on something older, but it's not something that I'm constantly watching. And something that I just forget about until I watch movies from this bygone era, if you will, is just the style of the films themselves are so different and from what we get today. And I'm not talking about, computer generated technology and that sort of thing, but even just like the long shots that last a very long time, and um some of the framing of the shots and the camera angles and like the position of the camera in terms of what you as the viewer see, like everything feels a lot more deliberate and everything lasts a lot longer. It's just a slower pace in terms of the filmmaking part, and I like that. I have nothing against the faster paced editing of like a Marvel movie or something. I love the Marvel movies generally. They're not all without their flaws, but there's something about that I miss, and there's not a whole lot of filmmakers that are doing those sorts of things in Hollywood these days. I mean, there probably are a lot more independent filmmakers that are still doing this, but I mean, Quentin Tarantino comes to mind. He's hardly a indie filmmaker at this point, but you don't have the Spielbergs and the uh, all those types that are doing these very deliberate long takes and things of that nature. So I don't know. I that was my very first impression was, man, I do miss that kind of filmmaking sometimes. My other impression was just, wow, there's a lot happening in this movie and a lot to unpack in this movie. And uh, being made in 1962, just a couple of years after Hitchcock's Psycho, I can definitely see an inspiration from Psycho and how it was filmed and shot in certain places. I don't feel like it's derivative, but you can definitely tell that Psycho was kind of a touchstone of inspiration for them. Um, but really, that I guess that's all I had to say. I liked the movie. I thought the performances were really good. The plot was very compelling. Clocks in at a little over 2 hours in runtime, but I didn't really ever feel like it was dragging. Like the pace was good, and yeah, overall, I really enjoyed my first viewing of this. What about you, Mel? What are your like experiences and impressions of whatever happened to Baby Jane?
Well, I'm actually in the same boat as you, watching this for the first time for this discussion. I think I mentioned in the last episode when Lisa and I were talking in general about the Hagsploitation type that I'm pretty familiar with whatever happened to Baby Jane. I'd heard a lot about it and I'd seen a lot of scenes from it, like almost to the point where I was like, have I watched this movie? I don't think I've watched the whole movie, and I had not. And so yeah, I really just sat down and watch the whole thing and kind of let it wash over me for this particular episode. And I will say this, part of why I feel like I probably knew a little bit more about scenes from the movie than I actually did was because I did start watching the Ryan Murphy feud series. I think I still have a few episodes left. I kind of started watching it and got distracted by something else and went off, but I will finish it at some point, I'm sure. So yeah, that, the kind of speculation in that movie about the disagreements between the two women, there are kind of um, uh, moments and scenes in that show where they're filming certain, famous scenes, where things were said, especially the scene, things were said afterward about their relationship on the set, like the scene where Betty Davis's character Baby Jane is kicking Blanche. That was one of the scenes that they kind of recreated in the television show. So watching it through, I appreciate what you were saying about the difference in the kind of way movies were shot then. And I feel like too, and of course, film isn't like my expertise. I'm a literature professor, but I feel like in order to do this movie, which is, even though it's in 1962 and set in the contemporary time period, in the present time of the movie, that you almost need those kind of lingering shots to get the just this kind of gothic crumbling house that they're in, that signifies their falling position as Baby Jane is kind of spending their money like crazy without telling Blanche, and Blanche knows that the money just isn't coming in as it should and is trying to help them kind of make it through this. But also like to ramp up that horror of Blanche as Baby Jane torments and kind of tortures her throughout the movie, like the lingering shots of the phone that could help her because she doesn't have access to a phone, and the lingering shots that show you that Blanche is trapped because Baby Jane has, after Blanche was paralyzed, kind of moved her into that upstairs room, so she can't get down the stairs. So there are these kind of ways, I think, that kind of stretching it out a little bit, it kind of goes to what these women are experiencing in the house, and this, I don't want to say cat and mouse game because it's kind of out and out, but just the kind of motivations and the way they're feeling and the way they're interacting with each other and how they're in the spaces of the house, all that was really interesting to me. um and I think I have a couple more things kind of to say. One is that I feel like they just really, Aldrich just lets these two actresses go and just chew the scenery in opposition to each other. And I think, like you were saying, we really see kind of their acting chops in this as well. And both of them, later said they thought that this movie, in some ways, even though it is part of what we think of as hagsploitation and has misogyny within it, and the reason why they're having issues is because of the way that women are treated and viewed in Hollywood. Uh, these roles and doing this movie, they felt kind of jump started their career. So they had more roles than they had expected as they move forward. So I think it's interesting, that Davis got the Oscar nomination, even though she didn't win. Like, this movie is a touchstone in this subgenre of horror, but it also, in a very real way, I think, dealt with these issues that Lisa and I talked about are happening in these movies, and perhaps allowed these women to, uh, I don't know exactly what the right word is here, but maybe like capitalize on that or move forward and expand or elongate their careers a little bit. Um, Another thing that I want to say before we get into a discussion is I really appreciated the fact that this movie kind of blends not just that kind of stereotypical or misogynist fear of women getting older or women's bodies not meeting a certain standard. There's body shaming in this movie and the age thing from the quote that Matt read at the beginning. But we also just see the way what happened to these women as children and the abuse that they went through and the way that kind of molded their relationship. And I mean, baby Jane is literally kind of stuck in this terrible situation of being stuck in like childhood almost. And I think the movie in some ways is like a dark take on a child star, like say Shirley Temple or something. And so totally not to excuse all the horror and the torture, but it's a little bit more complicated than just that, because you do see a little bit of the foundation that has hurt these women, both the larger career pressures, but also like what happened to them as kids and how this dynamic was kind of set up. So I think a little over 2 hours for a reason, because it's not just the horror and the violence. It's the kind of why is this happening, and we don't get all those answers. But I think that's something that Matt, you and I are probably going to talk about in this episode.
Oh, I think so. And why not? No time like the present, as they say, right? And I know that the film or that the series is we're doing is on hagsploitation, but I think to get to the hagsploitation part of Betty Davis's character, we do really have to look at the child character of Baby Jane, which we see in, well, I mean it's hard to call it a flashback because it's like one of the first. It is the first scene of the movie, but I mean it gives you at the title card. It was 19. I'm blanking. Was it 1916 or 1917? Whenever she was a this bro- uh, vaudeville star with her dad as the accompanist. And I think one thing that is really interesting and that the movie does really well is, like you said, it includes that scene so that you can see that yes, when we get to the present day and we have Betty Davis playing the role, she very much is in a lot of ways trapped in this childlike state where, I mean, it's never stated that her father abused her mentally or physically, but she very much is not given a real childhood, and it's very clear just from the brief scene that that she is kind of the breadwinner for the family, and her father has, I mean, he may not be verbally abusive, but he's definitely pushed her into this spotlight, a spotlight that she seems to enjoy and has begun to crave the attention of. But I feel like he's definitely, at the very minimum, one of those bad stage dads, if you will, who has um really really forced this upon her. And also, well, honey, now you have to perform, you bring in the money that feeds us, and those sorts of guilting things. It's not stated outright, but it does get implied that that's used later when she talks about how she believes that it was her money that bought the family house that she and Blanche are living in. So, yeah. One thing that I think is interesting, though, is they do portray her as a child as having this, for lack of a better phrase, because I just can't think of it. She's very Veruca Salt esque, this almost spoiled and petulant at times, because after she performs, she wants to go get ice cream and her dad says no, and she basically has a temper tantrum in front of the audience members, and her dad relents, and that's that. Okay, fine, honey, but this is the last time, kind of implying that no, it's not going to be the last time. There will be another last time and another after that, because she has ended up being spoiled, which is interesting because of the juxtaposition between her and Blanche. Blanche seems to be, in the shadow. Her mom says, well, when you become famous, you'll treat them better. then they're treating you, or something to that effect. And that's how Blanche is portrayed throughout the film. So I'm we'll talk about the end of the film, and yes, there will be spoilers for a what, 60, 70 year old movie. um but but yeah, that's how Blanche is portrayed, as the humble and more modest. And she did become a big film star, and actually eclipsed Jane as adults, partly because of Jane's alcohol and substance abuse issues. But even all of this to say, I guess, is that it really does set her up for failure. Her childhood is, well, like you said, Mel, it's that child actor, the curse of the child actor. So many child actors end up being traumatized by the experience, even if they are not directly, you know, uh, abused by anyone. Just the experience itself can be traumatic, especially for someone whose brain and emotions and everything else are still developing. I mean, yeah, it's very easy to see how she could become kind of trapped mentally at that age and never really progress further.
Yeah, and I like the way you're setting up the kind of conflict, I guess, between Blanche and Jane because, you know, I mean, like you said, we're going to spoil the movie, so we'll get more on Blanche as we go. But in the beginning of the contemporary time period, we see her enjoying the fact that she is getting a kind of a jump on her fame here. So she did have all that the fame, and she had the contracts that said they had to give Jane some work, but people didn't want to because, like you said, her substance abuse issues and the fact that they claimed that she had been violent toward the police, which we find out more about that later. And so Jane is kind of a mess, and people are sad because she's kind of holding Blanche back. But in the current part of the movie, they're older. Blanche, has been in an accident, which we find out more about later. At this point in the movie, everybody believes that baby Jane, either on purpose or drunkenly, hit her sister with a car. And because she was inebriated at the time, ran off on like a 3-day bender. Nobody could find her. And so when they did find her, that was when she was, violent toward the police. So that's what we're thinking at the beginning, because the studio people are talking about it. Later, another character talks about it. And so Jane is kind of taking care of Blanche in this current period. But in the current period, we have television. um, and we see through the neighbors and through Blanche herself watching the TV that her movies are coming back. Like they're getting played on TV during the day and sometimes in the evening. And her fans are kind of coming back a bit. She's getting fan mail that baby Jane is hiding from her and sending not great answers back to. So this kind of jealousy and competitiveness that we saw in the scenes that you were talking about at the beginning when they were children, we see starting to come back in current time. And Blanche is trying to take care of them financially, and Blanche is trying to make the decisions they need. We've got to downsize, we've got to save money here. She's worried about Jane's mental health. And even though it's scary at this time period to think of someone being institutionalized, that is what she is thinking. She's trying to figure out how they're going to take care of themselves as they get older, basically. But because of those scenes that you talked about when they were children, we know that Blanche isn't like the perfect kind of good sister that the studio people are talking to, right? Nobody is. Everybody's complicated. And in that moment when they're children and baby Jane is having the tantrum about the ice cream, Blanche says she doesn't want ice cream, thinking that since the father is saying they don't need to get ice cream and Jane is spoiled, that will make her look okay, like the father will like that or whatever, because he's mad that Jane is spoiled and making the scene. So she's like, well, I don't want ice cream, and the father like yells at her about it. And so you see this idea of like Jane being spoiled to a certain extent, and thinking rightly so that she's bringing in money for the family and her dad is her boss, and not her dad who can say no to her. But you also have the dad kind of pushing Blanche away because it's like Blanche isn't making the money. Blanche isn't bringing it in. And so the kind of relationship between the two girls and the father, and then like you said, the mother telling Blanche to just be kind to them because they don't mean these things, or they're taking care of us. All of that is in Blanche's mind too. So she may not be like giving Jane, putting rats on Jane's food, or killing Jane's pet like Jane does to her, but there is this friction between them, and that is underlying, that is the kind of almost gothic secret that's underlying the whole movie, is what actually happened in the accident. And obviously there's a lot we got to talk about before we get there. um but yeah, I love the fact that you start us right at the beginning, because I think the problems that start to play out between the two sisters, we see it in the portrayal of them as kids, and we see it in the portrayal of the studio execs talking about working with them, and now we see it flaring again as Blanche's fame starts to come back. That somehow, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but it seems to be triggering Jane's jealousy and ambitions. um and she's like seeking to achieve that because she never quite moved out of it. I mean, she spends most of the movie doing absolutely terrible things and then begging for forgiveness and saying that she's only doing things because she doesn't want to be caught or punished. So I mean, one of the things that's so horrifying about the movie, and it works with Hagsploitation and just with horror, is that you have this person who is older and is kind of stuck in this mentality. I mean, just the use of the doll throughout the movie is so disturbing too.
I was hoping we would not talk about the doll at all because that doll was creepy as all get out. Uh,
Those dolls were crazy creepy.
not even joking. That might have been the creepiest part of the movie for me. But that's also just because I've never liked those sort of porcelain dolls with their unblinking eyes. It's too uncanny valley for me. But but the baby Jane doll is a point of fixation for the real Jane, and it's almost kind of this symbol um, of her of her youth and what she used to have and what she doesn't have anymore. Um, I'm gonna put a pin in that for a second because I do want to say I do like what you're the thread you're following of this gothic theme because I absolutely see that as well. Like this crumbling house, a gothic secret. Like there's so much gothic going on in this movie. Um, but to go back to what I was saying, the doll itself is kind of almost like some sort of totem or something for her in terms of what she had, what she's lost, and what she's trying to regain by putting that ad in the paper and getting Edwin, the piano guy, to come and she's going to revive her career and all of that. Um, and I guess one thing maybe we should talk about so that we're not just going through the film beat by beat, because I don't know that we have time in the episode for that, but um, just the way that Betty Davis is the way her wardrobe is done, the way her makeup is done, like they really accentuate the age on her in a way that is almost downplayed on Blanche. I didn't look up the age differences between the actresses, but I mean, Betty Davis is very much made to look much older than Joan Crawford. And some of that has to be deliberate just in terms of this is somebody who has definitely struggled with alcohol and other substances throughout her life. So that definitely does prematurely age people in terms of, the skin and other things like that. But even accounting for that, like they really do lean into the hag of hagsploitation for her, even down to like her voice that she uses. I mean, it's this very, yeah, what do you want? Yeah, very gravelly smoker's woman kind of voice, and she's always talking like this. But then you see her when she imitates Blanche, and like her voice goes up an octave and she speaks so very properly, much like Blanche would, uh, and fools people. So I mean, it even there are so many choices made around the character in terms of how she's dressed, how she speaks, how she portrays herself, that really does lean into that. Like, she is an old hag, and I know we keep talking about hagsploitation because it's the theme of the show or the series, and I don't know of a better word for it aside from the psycho biddies uh, term, which I'm just not as big a fan of. But I don't want to keep falling back on the word hag, but I mean, it's very apt in this case for how Betty Davis's character is shown throughout the entire movie. Um, what do you think about that, Mel?
I agree. And both actresses actually were in their mid 50s when this was made. And I think Crawford was a couple years older than Davis, which is interesting if you think about, like, yeah, the way they're being represented. And I think what you're saying, like the voice and the makeup and everything, is supposed to kind of almost make her more monstrous if we're thinking of, just exactly what you're saying, like straight up exploitation. Though I have to say, like, the baby dolls were scary, but her changing her voice and tricking people was also kind of scary because, I mean, the fact that, I don't know, you just think about the observation and the manipulation that requires to be able to do that as just as a character. I mean, I know they were probably manipulating her voice for the movie, but that was just a really interesting take there. The other thing that's so monstrous about her that I think you were getting at, so I might be repeating a little bit of what you were talking about, but her age is accentuated a lot, and that is part of like the horror, like they can't get these parts anymore and she's stuck like this. But the fact that she is made up in such a way and they're accentuating her age in such a way, and even the way she does her makeup and every day is like what would have been done on a stage, right, when she was a child. um it plays up the horror of the fact that this is an older woman, an older appearing woman, but when she does her comeback, she wants to sing the same song she sang as a child. She wants to have the doll with her. um, Everything that she's doing and everything that she wants her quote unquote fans to remember, even though everybody she meets doesn't really remember her, is childlike. But she herself is, I'm assuming they want us to think 60s, maybe. I don't know. At the time period, I guess 50s would have been horrifying enough age wise. But like the juxtaposition, I think, of her being stuck and still trying to be a child while an adult, but then also just the deterioration that they're showing with the makeup. There's just seems to be a few layers there of what they're doing to make her a kind of a monstrous figure.
Absolutely. And I think you did kind of clarify the point I was trying to make, but was sort of circling around. Yeah, I 100% agree that with all of that, and especially the horror of watching this older, um, middle-aged, verging on elderly woman trying to sing the same songs that she sang as a child. I mean, I'll be honest, it was already creepy just with 2026 ears hearing her sing a song titled "I'm Sending a Letter to Daddy" um, as a child, and her singing it as an adult woman just amped up that creep factor even more. And again, some of that is going to be me watching this in 2026 compared to the movie being made in 1962, because I don't think it really would have raised much of an eyebrow that a vaudeville star set in 1917 would be singing such a song. But honestly, just even the song itself was a little creepy, and I think they did know that a little bit themselves, because they do linger on the shot when she's going through the scrapbook, and all the songs, which were written by her dad, have daddy in the title, I mean, that was a very deliberate shot. So I have to imagine that there was something about that that they were even in the 60s going, yeah, this is not healthy, right, guys?
Well, and if I remember right, I can't find this right now, right in my notes, but when she's going through the scrapbook, oh, here it is. She's muttering stuff about her childhood, and she says something about they just didn't love you enough or something. And I was unclear on whether that was like she's blaming herself, like the fans didn't love her anymore. She got older, so she couldn't continue her fame. But like the pathos in that scene with the scrapbook of like all her memories, all her thoughts. She even has a shrine kind of to the father in her room that we see when, one of the things she's doing is starving Blanche to death. And when Blanche manages to make it into Jane's room and finds some candy and is eating it, that's when she sees all the checks that Jane's been cashing, and she's the canceled checks, and she sees the uh like a little bit of that shrine that we see later. So yeah, I mean, just completely kind of stuck um in this past. All right, I'm going to shift us a little bit. It's not too much. I mentioned that she's starving Blanche. I want to talk just a little bit about her vengeance on Blanche, like as she sees Blanche's star starting to rise again. Um, and I think we need to talk too about like the step by step of crimes that Jane commits as the movie goes on, because that will set us up, I think, to talk about that iconic end. Um, but basically during the course of the film, baby Jane is getting more jealous about Blanche. The neighbors are talking about watching her shows on TV. Blanche is too. She finds out, she has her suspicions, but she finds out that um Blanche is going to sell the house and do the downsizing, and she immediately expects that this is because they want that Blanche wants to institutionalize her. And that's when, as you said earlier, Matt, she points out that the money that paid for these things like came from her and they're for her, and she should make these decisions. And so these seeds start getting planted in the very beginning of the movie, because there is a third person in the house with these two women, and that is her housekeeper, Elvira, who I'm sure we will talk about as we go. She's an important kind of player in the relationship of these two women. She's the kind of person who's like us, like observing it, but also involved. And she was played by Mady Norman. And I looked up some information about that actress, and she was an actress and a lecturer on African American lit and theater. She taught for a bit at UCLA. And in fact, in the movie, when she first saw the script, she pushed for some major revisions to her character's stereotypical dialogue that was there at the time, because she wanted to avoid misrepresentation of this character, turning it into a type. So there's just a little bit of information about her, but we see her having a conversation with Blanche at the beginning about the downsizing and the possible moving of Jane. Once Jane sees Blanche's career is like people are paying more attention to her, and she knows that she might not be in this house, even though Blanche says she's going to take care of her, she does, as I mentioned earlier, she's claimed she's going to clean Blanche's bird's cage, kills the bird, puts the bird on Blanche's dinner plate. At one point, she puts a rat on her plate. She makes it to where she can't communicate with anybody by phone. And we have that scene where Blanche is trying to get down the stairs. Um, and then she imitates Blanche's voice to keep the doctor from coming. And we have that scene where we see later when Elvira, the housekeeper, has been basically told to leave by Jane, but comes back anyway. We see that Blanche has been tied up in her bed, so she cannot get out of the bed. And of course, at this point, she is very ill from not having eaten for several days. Um, so, Matt, I feel like another major point, two major points of horror in this movie is one, the slow psychological and even physical torture of Blanche that ramps up as we go. And two, that scene when Jane murders Elvira, the housekeeper. That was so, I was like, I was watching this with a couple people, and we were just like yelling at Elvira not to put the hammer down. It's like, you just get the feeling that something awful is going to happen. And I think that scene is like, even though you think something terrible is going to happen, it's still shocking, and that kind of ramps up, kind of the way that Jane, her being stuck maybe, or her kind of becoming childlike in a way. I don't know. What did you think of that kind of ramp up of the horror, the torture scenes, and then the murder?
Well, I thought that it was a good pacing of the escalation because it does start. I don't want to use the word innocuously because I mean it kind of starts by Jane killing Blanche's bird and feet and trying to serve it to her for lunch. So that I mean that's hardly innocuous, but I mean every step is a further escalation of what has happened previously, and I mean every I guess what I'm trying to say and trying to articulate is that so much of the torture really does seem to be kind of torture from the mind of a child or someone stuck in a childlike state. You're being mean to me, so I'm going to kill your pet, and then I'm going to make bring your pet that I just killed as your food, and you're going to have to eat that. And you're trying to throw notes out the windows to the neighbor, so I'm gonna take the phone out of your room. You can't talk to people anymore. And you've tried to crawl down the stairs and call people and have me taken away, so I'm going to tie you up. I mean those are very childlike responses to things. And again, I want to make it very clear. I'm in no way excusing any of the things that Jane did. That by any means, none of this is excusing. But it it does really show her mental state without having to tell you directly that this is someone trapped in their childhood. And heck, even there's one point where it's after the bird, but I believe before she's brought her the rat, where Blanche is like, I'm afraid to eat. You've made me afraid to eat the food. And Jane says, well, I'm not giving you more food because you didn't eat your din din. And she uses the phrase din din like a couple of times. And I mean, it's one of those things that just feels weird hearing come out of the mouth of one adult speaking to another, you know, and she means it seriously as she says it, the character. Um, you know, it's one thing if you're an adult talking to your child, like, oh, you need to eat your din din, come on. But no, these are two grown adults, and that's just an odd phrase for someone in their 50s or 60s to say to their sister of a similar age, you know, unless they are joking or something. But she wasn't. She was serious. And I guess all that's to say that I mean, all of her reactions very much seem like almost impulsive reactions that a child would, and then the decisions that a child would make. Um, I don't want you to expose what I've done to you up to this point, so I'm going to tie you up. Elvira just discovered what I did to you, so well, I have to kill her. I mean, look what you made me do in order to not get caught. I mean, she doesn't say those words, but it certainly comes across that that's how she was feeling. Um, so yeah. I mean, I think each one of those escalating points, not only does it drive home just the escalating tension and the increasing dangerousness and psychosis of Jane, but it really does come back to that this is somebody who is like they're mentally broken inside, and she is very much trapped in this childlike mentality and trying to reclaim and relive that age rather than accepting the fact that you know she's she's not a child anymore.
Yes, I love the way you pointed out the din din, the language that she was using, the fact that she goes into, I mean, I hate to use the word hysterics, but she's really like raging and chewing the scenery at that point where she's hysterical because she thinks the police are gonna to come get her. She's not answering the door. Blanche is unconscious from lack of food and she's yelling at her to make decisions for her. This is the person she's torturing. She like you said is like, Elvira made me kill her. She says multiple times it's not my fault while doing things that are her fault, because to her, yeah, I mean, like you said, she's a child, so she's just trying to get out of punishment. She's just trying to get what she wants, and then she has that weird kind of switch to guilt, which is also a childlike thing. I think it's horrifying the way she's doing a slow murder on her sister Blanche, but then treats Blanche like the older sister. You know, when Blanche is unconscious on the beach at the end and she's talking to her like, we need ice cream or give me advice. That is a very childlike thing though, you know, to kind of like love and hate a sibling, but she's an adult doing really dangerous, horrible things. And that tit for tat gets worse and worse. And yet at the same time, she's going back and forth between, oh, I hate you, so I'm going to make you do this. But you're my sister and I need your advice. I need your help. And I think, I mean, psychosis, I think, is a perfect term for it in a way. I mean, she is broken. It's almost like there's not two personalities, but yeah, that childlike idea of like just being all what you want, trying to get your way, and then not being able to deal with the consequences or going too far. Like she just hasn't learned how to modulate that in some ways. But all right, I think this pushes us to the end because she has this kind of fantasy that she talks about a couple times, like we could have lived on the beach. She says one time we could have had friends. And so yeah, I mean, Blanche can't move at all at this point because she's tied to the bed and is in and out of consciousness. And she takes her to the beach, which this is a scene that I think a lot of people have probably seen as well, the at the very 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 end. But the police are looking for them because they now know that Elvira was murdered. They found a body that Jane had hidden, and they're at the beach. They spend the whole night there, and this is when we find out the kind of plot twist, I guess, of the movie, is that when the accident happened, accident quotes, it's not an accident, everybody thinks that baby Jane had drunkenly hit her sister. But Blanche says, like, look, I'm dying and I got to tell you what actually happened. And she says, we went to a party. You were super cruel. You were imitating me and you were telling stories about me that weren't true. And you were making me feel like horrible and you were insulting me. And so when you had been drinking a whole lot, and when you went to open the gate, I tried to run you over, but you kind of got out of the way and I ended up being injured. And she said that, you know, she crawled to the gates and that's why it was interpreted as her having been hit. Um and what is, I think Blanche says to Jane that even with her issues, you weren't ugly then, I made you that way. And then Jane is like, what, we could have been friends, which is a really sad moment, but it's also like, I don't know if they could have been because their issues were formed when they were kids. And then we go back full circle almost to the beginning of the movie because Jane is like, well, now that I know the truth or whatever, you know, that basically she was on the drunken bender, but after she had escaped death at the hands of her sister, she actually didn't try to hurt anyone. She's like, I'm going to go get ice cream, and it's the act of getting the ice cream and not paying that gets attention paid to her, and that's how the cops find her. Um, but I don't know. Because I just seen scenes, and I this is a 1962 movie that was never spoiled for me. I did not know that it was going to be a twist like that. I figured there's going to be something because it's so vague in the beginning as to who was doing what when. Um, so I wondered if it was going to be something like that. But I think this goes back to, and Matt, I want to let you speak on it too, but I think this kind of goes back to what we saw at the beginning of the movie, which is that the relationship between the two sisters was so damaged, um, that the whole movie makes you think that Jane is the villain, and she is for the majority of the movie. But then we also have Blanche having to deal with her guilt because, I mean, I guess it takes two to tango. I mean, they both had their issues, and they were both playing off of each other, these conflicts, and what's the word I'm looking for? These things that happened to them as children.
Yeah, I think. I mean, wow, I don't know what I can say that you haven't already said. It feels like I'm just gonna go, yeah, yeah, yeah. But you said that so well. Um, I think for me, well, I'll say the same thing. I felt like when they didn't show faces of anyone when the accident happened, that there was definitely something going on with that that was not as it seemed. So I had my suspicions, but when Blanche reveals the truth, it definitely, I mean, she's been painted as the, I mean, she, this is not to by any means demean or diminish the torture that she endured, but she was painted entirely as a an innocent victim, and we find out that's not the case. I mean, they both have their secrets and issues, and the fact that not just the fact that she was trying to run her sister down with a car, but the fact that she let the lie go on for years that Jane was the one driving the car. I mean, she may not have ever said it outright. That's never clear or not, but it's very clear that she didn't do anything to stop any of the rumors that people had going on about it. Even in that final scene where they're show the patrons at the beach shack, that you know the little um, uh, hot dog stand or whatever it is, talking about it. They even say, "Oh, that Jane, she ran." Like that's what the rumors say, that she ran over her sister and paralyzed her. And I mean, to let someone go on for years and years. I mean, I presume decades even, because the crash happens in what, like 1937 or something, and this is present day now, so we're in the 60s. She let her sister believe for half her life that she was the one that paralyzed Blanche. And I mean, I think we've all gotten ourselves into that situation where we've told a lie, and then it has spiraled out and taken on a life of its own, so to speak. And there is a act of, I guess, cruelty or something in Blanche where, I mean, she, it was in her power to correct this, and she never did until her deathbed confession, uh, on the beach here. And that really changes, or at least for me, it changed my perception of the character. Again, not saying that the character deserved one iota of what Jane did to her. All of that unequivocally torture and horrible. But I think you're right. When Jane says, "You mean all this time we could have been friends?" I think you're right to say that no, they couldn't have been. It might be nice to think that, but I think their division was set in that first scene in 1917 as kids. And not to say that they couldn't have had a much better and healthier relationship, but I don't know that they would ever have been friends, just by nature of the jealousy that each had for each other. Because I mean, it's obvious that Jane has an extreme amount of jealousy for Blanche's stardom when she eclipsed Jane and was the bigger star. Yeah, I mean, I don't think they ever could have been friends. I think they were both too broken to be friends with each other. But Blanche sure does have some culpability in terms of the relationship that they ended up with. Um, yeah, yeah, that's kind of my thought. Not going to blame the victim. She doesn't deserve the torture she got, but she does have some culpability in their completely crumbled, ruinous, fractured relationship.
Yes, I was actually saying yes over again while you were talking at one point in my microphone. The computer was like, "Do you want to unmute yourself?" But I didn't want to interrupt you. But I really liked how you teased out Blanche's culpability there. The like 30 something years of letting Jane believe, whether she said so or not, letting all these people, like the entire country, believes that she did this. And then when Jane at the end, like you said, she doesn't deserve everything she got from Jane. Jane should not have done these things. Jane has some serious issues. But the way she remembers when the police found her, they told her that her sister was hurt, which seemed shocking to her, that she did it, which is a real shock because she didn't remember it. And then she says that they hit her, if I remember right, at the end. And so, you know, this there's the kind of horrible stuff that happened to them when they were kids, but then this is another just kind of trauma thrown on Jane to live her life with the legacy of what happened before and the discomfort with her sister because of her jealousy, but also to have to live the second half of her life trying to grasp something that was better while thinking that she had attempted murder. Um, so I don't know. Yeah, I like the way you're pointing that out because it's not just the violence um of the car wreck as murder. It's also the violence of the allowing the lie to go and go and go and go. So that these two women both have a hand in this dynamic that has come up between them. And the way that the movie is structured by like you said too, like that first scene shows us that there can be no what the word I'm looking for, like reunion. There can be no real relationship between these two women because it was kind of doomed from the beginning in a way. And listeners, if you have seen the movie, you know how the end is. If you haven't, I guess since we've spoiled everything else, I'll go ahead and spoil that. The police, find them, as I mentioned earlier. We assume, as Matt said, that Blanche made a deathbed confession, but we don't know. She might actually be okay, which that's its own kind of, I don't know. One, if she gets it off her chest when she's dying, that's the reason she says it, and then now maybe she has to live with it if they rescue her. But Jane is just done for. She's singing her songs and dancing, and she's kind of an object of ridicule and fear to the people on the beach as they just kind of watch her. So she has that break that Matt mentioned earlier as kind of come to be with her realizing what actually happened. So yeah, we have hit the end of the movie and our discussion of 1962's Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. If you have not watched this movie, I recommend checking it out. It's often pretty high on lists of best movies, and it is very complex. If you're a Betty Davis or Joan Crawford fan, it's definitely worth watching it just to see them do their thing. So we are at No Fear Cast on Twitter and Instagram, and we have a Facebook page. Our email is nofearcast@gmail.com. If you love what we're doing, you can consider supporting us on Patreon, and we have merchandise available at our website, nofearcast.com, or you can simply rate and review us, which is entirely free, and it helps other listeners find us. Theme music by Nicholas Gasparini. We will be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode.